pharmacist called me back at 7,014 on a Wednesday evening, and the first thing he said was, "Mr. Holt, I need you to listen carefully, and I need you to stay calm." I was in the garage looking for a wrench. My wife had been home from the hospital for 2 days. I thought he was calling about a refill. He wasn't. "I'd been filling your wife's prescriptions for 11 years, he said. "I know her chart better than most of her doctors do. Something is wrong, and I don't think it's coming from inside her body." I set the wrench down on the workbench. "What does that mean?" "It means I think someone is adding something to what she's taking. I can't prove it yet, but I'd been doing this for 31 years, and the numbers don't add up. Her warfarin levels last month were 4 times her prescribed dose. The month before, 3 times. That doesn't happen by accident. Not twice." I stood in my garage at 7:14 on a Wednesday evening, and the world as I understood it ended quietly, the way a light bulb burns out, no warning, just gone. My name is Leonard, and I'm 67 years old. I spent 38 years as a high school history teacher in Greensboro, North Carolina. The last 12 of them as department head. I retired with a pension, a reputation I was proud of, and a house my wife and I had paid off 3 years early. I am not a man who dramatizes things. I coached JV baseball for 20 years. I taught the same kids who later came back to shake my hand at their 10-year reunions. I have never been the kind of man who panics. But that night in the garage, I had to sit down on a paint bucket because my legs stopped working. My wife Ruth Ann and I had been married for 42 years. She was a pediatric nurse for 35 of them, retired 4 years before me, spent her retirement gardening and volunteering at the Literacy Center on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. She was sharp, funny, stubborn in the best possible way, and deeply suspicious of anything that came in a box. She cooked everything from scratch. She had her doctor's cell number saved because he gave it to her voluntarily after 20 years of her asking better questions than most of his residents. She started getting sick 18 months before that phone call. Not sick in a dramatic, obvious way. Sick in the way that's easy to explain away. Fatigue that we blamed on age. A tremor in her left hand that her neurologist said was benign essential tremor. Bruising that showed up on her arms and legs without explanation. Her internist adjusted her blood thinner dosage twice, said her levels were inconsistent, and ordered more monitoring. One morning she got up from the breakfast table and fell against the doorframe. I drove her to urgent care. They did blood work, told us her INR was dangerously elevated. Her blood was too thin. Changed her dosage again. Said she must be eating too much leafy greens, that it interferes with warfarin. Ruth Ann told them she hadn't changed her diet in 15 years. They wrote it in her chart as dietary non-compliance. She lost 17 pounds over 5 months. The woman who walked 2 miles every morning started using the railing on the stairs. She got winded unloading the dishwasher. I watched my wife, a woman who'd held the hands of dying children and come home to cook dinner and do it all again, become someone I didn't recognize. And I could not find the reason why. Our daughter-in-law, Shelby, had moved into the guest room 14 months earlier. Our son, Wyatt, had taken a contracting job in Aberdeen, South Dakota, the kind of work that paid well and required being on site for stretches of 6 to 8 weeks at a time. They had a 2-year-old daughter, Lily. Shelby said she didn't want to be alone with the baby in their apartment in Raleigh. Ruth Ann said, of course, come stay. We had the room. We loved our granddaughter. And honestly, having a baby in the house gave Ruth Ann something to get up for on the mornings she felt worst. I had reservations. I never said out loud. Shelby was 29. She'd grown up wealthy outside Charlotte. Private schools, a father who owned 3 car dealerships. She and White had met at a wedding 4 years ago. She was beautiful in a way that seemed to require effort and maintenance. She was polite to me in the way that people are polite to someone they've decided doesn't matter. With Ruth Ann, she was different, attentive in a way that took me a while to name. She watched Ruth Ann the way someone watches a weather forecast, interested not in the person but in the prediction. 6 weeks after she moved in, she started helping Ruth Ann with her medications. Ruth Ann's regimen was complicated. Warfarin twice a day at precise times, a blood pressure medication, a vitamin D supplement, a low-dose aspirin, and an iron supplement her doctor had added after the weight loss. Shelby organized everything into a weekly pill tray. She set alarms on her phone so Ruth Ann wouldn't miss a dose. She brought Ruth Ann her evening medication with a glass of water every night at 8 o'clock, right before Ruth Ann's television program, the one she watched every night without fail for 11 years. It looked like care. It was framed as care. Wyatt called home from South Dakota twice a week, and every time Shelby told him his mother was doing better. She said it in that tone, reassuring, certain, the tone of someone in control of the information. Ruth Ann never said she felt better. I should have asked why those two things were different. I didn't. The pharmacist's name was Douglas. He'd been filling our prescriptions since before my retirement. He called me because he couldn't call Ruth Ann. She was asleep, and he said he didn't want to alarm her without more information. He'd been watching her warfarin refill pattern for 3 months. The timing was off. She was refilling her prescription early, slightly, consistently, a few days ahead of schedule, month after month. At first, he'd assumed she was dropping pills or losing them. Then he did the math. If she was taking the prescribed dose, she shouldn't be running low early. But her INR levels were spiking, which meant she was getting more warfarin than prescribed, not less. Someone was giving her extra doses. "Do you want me to call a doctor tonight?" Douglas asked. "Yes," I said, "and don't tell anyone else you called me." I walked back inside. Ruth Ann was asleep in the recliner, her TV program on low, Shelby in the kitchen washing the dinner dishes. She looked up when I came in and smiled. "She fell asleep about an hour ago," Shelby said. "She had a good day, I think." "Good," I said. "That's good." I smiled back, and I understood, standing in my own kitchen, that the most important thing I would do for the rest of my life was to never let that woman know what I now suspected. Ruth Ann's doctor, a man named Dr. Elliot Sayers, called me the next morning. He'd spoken with Douglas. He asked me to bring Ruth Ann in that afternoon for blood work and to tell no one the reason, not even Ruth Ann, not yet. He said he needed to rule out something before he said it out loud. He didn't rule it out. He called me to his office while Ruth Ann was having blood drawn and told me her INR levels over the past 14 months formed a pattern consistent with deliberate, repeated warfarin poisoning. He used the word deliberate. He said it slowly, like a man who understood the weight of what he was placing on another person's shoulders. Warfarin in excess thins the blood to the point of crisis. Internal bleeding, hemorrhagic stroke, organ failure. At the doses Ruth Ann had been receiving, he estimated she was somewhere between 6 and 18 months from a fatal event that would look, in the chart, like a complication of her existing condition. An accident, a natural progression, the death of a sick woman who had been sick for over a year. "We need to contact the police," Dr. Sayers said. "I know," I said. "Give me 1 hour first." I sat in my car in the parking lot of the medical building for 40 minutes. I called Wyatt. He was on a job site in Aberdeen. Wind loud in the background. I told him his mother was having some tests and he shouldn't worry. I didn't tell him anything else. I needed to know before I said another word to my son whether it was possible he knew. I listened to his voice. He asked about her appetite. He asked if she'd been sleeping. He told me to tell her he'd call Sunday. His worry was real. I know my son. Whatever Shelby was doing, she was doing it alone. I called Detective Carol Mabry at the Guilford County Sheriff's Office. I'd met her once, 3 years ago, when one of my former students had been the victim of a scam and she'd worked the case. She answered on the second ring. I told her everything in 11 minutes. She did not interrupt me once. "Mr. Holt," she said when I finished, "I want you to go home. Act normal. Don't move her medications. Don't confront anyone. Don't change anything in your house. I'm going to send someone to speak with you tonight at 7, after your household is asleep. Can you make that happen?" "Yes." "I need you to understand that what you're describing, if it's accurate, is attempted murder. We're going to treat it that way." I drove home. Ruth Ann was tired from the blood work. Shelby made soup for dinner, homemade, with the little noodles Ruth Ann liked. She brought Ruth Ann her 8 o'clock medication right on schedule, set the glass of water on the side table, asked if she needed anything else. I watched my daughter-in-law care for my wife and felt something I don't have a word for. Not hatred, Not exactly. More like looking at something beautiful and understanding it was made to destroy. The detective who came to my door at 7:10 that night was a man named Roland Fitch, plainclothes, 10 years on the investigations unit. He looked like a man who'd heard every version of every story and could still take them seriously. He sat at my kitchen table with a recorder and a notepad, and for 2 hours we went through everything. Ruth Ann's medical history, the pharmacy records Douglas had already sent over, the timeline of Shelby's arrival, and the escalation of Ruth Ann's symptoms. When I finished, Fitch looked at his notes and then looked at me. "Who has access to your wife's medications?" "Everyone in this house. But Shelby is the one who manages them. She set up the weekly tray. She brings Ruth Ann her evening dose every night." "Does your wife take the medication directly from Shelby, or does she take it herself?" "Shelby brings it to her. She hands it to her." Fitch nodded in a way that wasn't comforting. "We're going to want to test the contents of that pill tray, and I'd like to install a small camera in the room where the medications are kept. A cabinet, a shelf, wherever she stores them. The hallway cabinet, outside the master bedroom." "Good. I'm also going to ask that you not tell your wife what we're doing just yet, just for a few days." That part was hard. Ruth Ann and I had never kept a secret from each other that mattered. Not in 42 years. But I agreed, because I understood that the wrong word to the wrong person at the wrong time could cost Ruth Ann her life. Fitch left before 10. I sat on the edge of our bed while my wife slept, watching her breathe, and I thought about how close I had come to never having this conversation. How many more months of doctors adjusting her dosage, blaming her diet, adding new medications to treat symptoms that were being manufactured. How easy it would have been to miss. I couldn't sleep. I made coffee at 4 a.m. and sat at the kitchen table. At 4:22, I heard the hallway cabinet open. I didn't move. I heard the soft sound of a pill tray sliding on a shelf. Then the cabinet closed. Quiet footsteps back down the hall. I called Fitch at 7 a.m. He told me they'd already reviewed the overnight footage from the camera they'd placed at 11 p.m. the night before. Shelby had opened the cabinet at 4:21 a.m. She had added something to Ruth Ann's morning dose. The footage was clear. Fitch said the lab team would come that morning to collect the pill tray and that we would have preliminary results within 48 hours. That morning I made breakfast, eggs and toast, the way I always did on Thursday mornings. Shelby came down with Lily on her hip. She made coffee and sat at the table and talked about whether it was warm enough to take Lily to the park later. She was easy, comfortable, unhurried. The pill tray sat in the cabinet down the hall. "I already gave Ruth Ann her morning medications," Shelby said. My stomach went cold. "Oh." She was awake early. She asked me to bring them. I excused myself and called Fitch from the back porch. He told me not to panic, that the dosing at that level would not cause an acute crisis, that Ruth Ann was in no immediate danger. He told me to make sure she drank water and ate something. He told me 48 hours. I went back inside and made my wife a full breakfast. I told Ruth Ann the truth the next afternoon, while Shelby had taken Lily to the park and we were alone in the house for the first time in months. I sat beside her on the bed and took her hand and told her as plainly and as calmly as I could manage. Her face did not do what I expected. She didn't cry. She didn't seem shocked. She was quiet for a long time, looking at the window, and then she said, "I knew something in that house was wrong. I just thought it was me." I said, "It was never you." She said, "How long?" I said I didn't know exactly. 14 months at minimum. She looked at me for a long moment. She was trying to outlast me, she said, not as a question. Just a woman who had spent 35 years as a nurse understanding, clinically, precisely what had been done to her. She needed it to look like my body was failing on its own. She was patient about it. She was, I said. Ruth Ann closed her eyes. Then she opened them and said, "Don't tell Wyatt yet. When we do it together." The lab results came back in 31 hours, not 48. Fitch called me Thursday afternoon. The pill tray contained warfarin tablets that had been supplemented with crushed additional warfarin. The secondary source was a pharmaceutical-grade compound, not a consumer blood thinner. When they ran Shelby's credit history and purchase records with a court order issued that morning, they found a series of purchases from an online pharmaceutical supply company using a name that was close to but not exactly hers, one letter transposed. The purchases went back 16 months. The first order was placed 9 days after she moved into our house. There was something else. Fitch played me a voicemail from his phone, pulled from records of Shelby's calls. She had called her brother in Charlotte 6 weeks earlier. She said, "Ruth Ann had another bad episode. The doctors keep adjusting and adjusting. Wyatt is starting to accept that this is just how it's going to be." A pause. "He cried last night. Poor thing." A pause. "The house is worth $460,000. I've already looked at comparable sales in the neighborhood. Once there's an estate, Wyatt gets everything. I just have to be the good wife long enough for that to happen." Her brother said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "You sure about this?" "I've been sure for a year and a half," she said. I put the phone down. My hand was shaking. Shelby had not married Wyatt. She had acquired him. He was the vehicle. Ruth Ann was the obstacle. Our house, our savings, the life insurance policy I'd carried since 1987, that was the destination. She had calculated it with the patience of someone who understood that the best crimes look like tragedies. Fitch gave me a choice that I already knew the answer to. We can arrest her now, or we wait 2 to 3 more days to ensure the purchase records are fully documented and the lab analysis is complete. The case is strong now. In 3 days, it will be airtight. 3 days, I said, but my wife doesn't take anything from that cabinet. Already arranged, we replaced the tray contents with inert tablets. Whatever she's adding going forward, Ruth Ann will never actually receive it. For 3 more mornings, I watched Shelby bring Ruth Ann a glass of water and a handful of pills with a smile. I watched Ruth Ann accept them and say thank you. I watched my wife's face give away nothing, and I thought, not for the first time, that the strongest person I had ever known was not a soldier or a politician or an athlete, but a 64-year-old woman in a cardigan who had outlasted someone who wanted her dead. On the 4th day, Fitch called at noon. "We're ready. Tonight, if you can arrange it." Wyatt had driven in from South Dakota 2 days earlier. We told him his mother needed him home, that her health had declined, which was true. He was in the house. Ruth Ann had asked for that. She said she needed him to see it, because she knew he would spend the rest of his life wondering if he could have stopped it, and she wanted to make sure he understood that he hadn't caused it. That evening, I grilled pork chops in the backyard, the way I used to every Friday in the summers when the kids were young. Shelby set the table. Wyatt gave Lily a bath and brought her down in pajamas. Ruth Ann moved slowly, but she sat at the table and she ate, and she talked about the garden, and she asked Lily if she wanted to help her plant marigolds this weekend. Lily said yes, and then changed her mind and said no, and then said yes again, and we all laughed. Shelby poured the iced tea. She touched Ruth Ann's shoulder when she refilled her glass. She called her mom. The doorbell rang at 7:45. I stood up. "I get it." Detective Fitch was on the front porch with 2 officers from the sheriff's department. "Everyone home?" he asked. "Come in." Wyatt stood up from the table, confused, the way you do when something you can't explain is happening in a place where nothing unexpected is supposed to happen. Ruth Ann stayed seated. Her hands were folded in her lap. Shelby went still. "Shelby Ann Holt," Fitch said, stepping toward her. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Ruth Ann Holt through deliberate administration of warfarin sulfate over a period of no less than 14 months. The room broke open. Wyatt said, "What?" He said it 3 times. He looked at his wife, at me, at his mother, and back at his wife, and the color drained from his face in stages, like a tide going out. Shelby said nothing. She looked at the officers and then she looked at Ruth Ann. "You have the right to remain silent," Fitch continued. "Wyatt, tell them," Shelby said. Her voice was strange, controlled but with something underneath it, something tight. "Tell them I love this family. Tell them I would never." Wyatt could not speak. One of the officers took her arm, and Shelby looked at Ruth Ann for a long moment, not with guilt, not with grief, with something more like frustration, like a plan that had gone to the wrong conclusion. "Everything I did," Shelby said, "I did because you people had everything and never once. Take her out, Fitch said. The door closed. Lily started to cry from her high chair, confused by the noise and the strangers. Utan got up from the table, slowly, and went to her granddaughter and lifted her and held her and swayed, the way she had held Wyatt when he was small, the way she'd held every crying child in every room she'd ever worked in. Wyatt sat at the table with his face in his hands. I pulled a chair beside him. Dad, he could barely say it. Did she was it how long did you? 4 days, I said. I found out 4 days ago, and you were the first person I wanted to call, but I had to know first that you were safe. He looked up. Safe? I had to know you weren't part of it. I looked at my son. I knew you weren't, but I had to know. He understood. He nodded slowly and then he put his face back in his hands. And I sat beside him and didn't try to fix it, because some things aren't supposed to be fixed quickly. Some things need the weight of sitting in them for a while. After a long time, Ruthann came and sat on his other side. She handed Lily to me. Lily immediately grabbed my glasses, and she put her arm around Wyatt's shoulder. You didn't do this, she said. She fooled you because she spent 2 years practicing how to fool you. That's not your failure. That's her crime. I brought her into this house, he said. And I said, come. We both did. She pulled in closer. You are not responsible for another person's evil, son. You are only responsible for what you do next. What he did next over the following months was quietly, carefully rebuild. The trial was 7 months later in Guilford County Superior Court. Shelby's defense argued that the warfarin overages were the result of a medication management error, that Shelby had misread dosage instructions and, intending to help, had caused harm without knowing it. The jury heard the surveillance footage, the purchase records with the transposed name, the voicemail to her brother, and the testimony of a pharmacist who had been doing this for 31 years. They deliberated for 4 hours. They came back with guilty verdicts on attempted murder in the first degree, administering poison with intent to kill, and conspiracy to commit murder. The judge sentenced Shelby to 22 years in state prison with the possibility of parole considered after 18. Wyatt filed for divorce from his jail cell the week after the verdict. He was awarded full custody of Lily. He moved back to Greensboro, rented a small house 6 minutes from ours, and accepted a project management job with a construction firm based downtown. On his first week, he called me on his lunch break to say the work was good and the people were decent, and he thought he might be okay. I believed him. Rutan's recovery took time. Warfarin toxicity leaves tracks. She spent 2 months under close medical supervision, her levels checked twice a week, her diet monitored, her energy carefully rationed. The tremor in her left hand improved once she was off the excess medication. Her weight stabilized, then slowly returned. She started walking again. 10 minutes at first, then 20, then the full 2 miles she'd always done, in a different order than before because she said she needed new things to look at. By the following spring, she was back at the literacy center on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. She came home one Thursday afternoon and told me about a woman she was tutoring, a 61-year-old grandmother who had never learned to read because of a childhood nobody should have had. Utan said the woman had cried that morning when she read her first full sentence on her own, and Ruthann had cried too, and she said it plainly, not embarrassed by it at all. That's who my wife is. One Sunday evening, about 8 months after the trial, Wyatt and I were sitting on the back porch watching Lily run through the sprinkler in the yard. The light was going golden the way it does in Greensboro in late September, and Ruthann was inside starting dinner, and we could hear Lily laughing from 30 feet away. Wyatt said, "Did you ever think about not catching her? Just letting it go? Before you called Detective Fitch, I mean. Did you think about whether it was worth it?" I thought about that for a moment. "No," I said. "I thought about how close I came to never knowing. That's what I thought about." He nodded. We watched Lily fall down in the wet grass and get back up immediately, the way 2-year-olds do, unaware that falling is supposed to be a problem. "I keep thinking about how I looked at her every day," Wyatt said, "for 2 years, how she held my daughter, how I told her things I've never told anyone, and none of it was real." "Some of it might have been," I said. "I don't think people are entirely one thing. But what she chose to do, that was entirely hers. It had nothing to do with what you gave her or what you withheld. She came in with a plan. The love you had for her was real. That's yours. She can't have it back." He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Mom said something like that to me. Different words." "We've been married 42 years," I said. "We had time to work out the same ideas." He laughed. It was the first time I'd heard him laugh without sadness underneath it. I noted it the way you note things that matter. Not saying anything, just holding it. Rutan called us in for dinner about 20 minutes later. Pot roast, the slow-cooked kind, the house smelling like it had on every important evening of my children's lives. Lily was wrapped in a towel and eating crackers in her high chair. We sat down, all four of us, and Rutan reached across the table and took my hand before she reached for the serving spoon, the way she always had, the way she had done for 42 years without either of us ever commenting on it. "I want to tell you something before we're done here. I know there are people watching this who are in a situation that looks smaller than mine on the outside. Someone in your house, someone in your family, someone who is supposed to love you, and something is off. You can feel it. You've tried to name it and couldn't. You've been told you're imagining it. You've been told you're paranoid, that you're not being fair, that this person loves you when you should be grateful. I'm here to tell you that your body knows things before your mind can articulate them. When something is wrong, something in you records it. It shows up as unease, as a small persistent voice you keep talking yourself out of, as the feeling that things don't quite add up. Don't talk yourself out of it. I almost lost my wife because I believed the performance was the person, because care that looks right from the outside is hard to question, because the alternative was so ugly I didn't want to name it. The pharmacist who called me had been watching numbers for 31 years. He had no reason to call me that evening, except that something in him said it was wrong, and he chose to say it out loud. One phone call. That is what stands between my wife being here and my wife being buried in the yard she tends every morning. Ruthan is in the kitchen right now. I can hear her talking to Lily about which book they're going to read before bed. Lily wants the one about the bear. Ruthan wants to branch out. They're negotiating seriously. In a few minutes I'll go in and cast my vote, probably for the bear, and Ruthan will roll her eyes and say I always take Lily's side, and she won't be wrong. She's alive. She's in her kitchen. She is 64 years old, and she has her whole life in front of her, and I am not going to waste a single ordinary evening of it. If this story reached you, I hope it means something. I hope it gives you the permission you might be waiting for, to say something, to call someone, to trust the voice in you that has been trying to get your attention. Because the people who want to hurt you are counting on your silence. They are banking on your willingness to explain away what you're seeing. Don't give them that. Now tell me, is there someone in your life right now that something just doesn't sit right about? You don't have to share details, but if you know, you know. Leave a comment. Share this with someone who needs it. And if this channel has meant something to you, subscribe. There are more stories here, real ones, the kind that stay with you. My wife says you can't always know what's in someone's heart, but you can pay attention to their pattern, what they do when no one is supposed to be watching. That's the whole story right there. Stay careful. Stay close to the people who have shown you, not just told you, who they are. I think about Douglas a lot, a pharmacist behind a counter who had been filling the same prescriptions for 11 years, who noticed a pattern that 3 doctors had missed, and who chose to pick up the phone on a Wednesday evening when he could have told himself it wasn't his business. That one decision is the reason my wife is alive. Not a detective, not a hospital, a man who paid attention and had the character to act on what he saw. That's the thing I keep coming back to. Character isn't what you do when it's easy. It's what you do when it costs you something. When speaking up might be wrong, might embarrass you, might make someone angry, might not be your place. Douglas risked being wrong. He called anyway. And I think about all the people in my wife's life over those 14 months who might have noticed something and said nothing, because saying something felt like too much. Ruthan noticed. From almost the beginning, she told me something felt off. She said the word dangerous about her daughter-in-law 9 months before anyone else used it. I dismissed her, not because I had evidence she was wrong, but because the truth she was pointing at was uncomfortable, and I chose comfort over her instinct. That failure belongs to me entirely. Intelligence without the willingness to face an ugly conclusion is just a more sophisticated way of staying blind. And Shelby, I've thought about her too, more than I expected to. What she did was a choice, made over and over again, for 14 months, every morning at 40:21 a.m., when she opened that cabinet in the dark. People talk about evil like it arrives all at once, like a lightning strike. It doesn't. It arises in small decisions, each one easier than the last because the previous one didn't stop you. She started with a plan and she kept feeding it, and somewhere in that process, the person she might have been got left behind. That is the real tragedy underneath the legal one, not what she did to Ruth Arn, what she did to herself. What I want my son to carry forward from this, what I want anyone watching to carry forward, is that the people who last, the ones who come out of hard things with something intact, are not the ones who avoided the pain. They're the ones who refuse to become smaller because of it. Ruth Ann could have come out of those 14 months bitter, suspicious, closed. Instead, she came out of them choosing to write a letter, choosing to go back to the literacy center, choosing to chase her granddaughter through the garden with a hose. That is not softness. That is the hardest kind of strength there is, the kind that knows exactly what was done to it and decides to keep living fully anyway. I retired from 38 years of teaching history because I believed that understanding the past was the only honest way to navigate the present. What this year taught me is that the same principle applies inside a family. You cannot protect the people you love by looking away from what is happening to them. Paying attention is an act of love. Following through on what you see, even when it's costly, even when you'd rather not. That is what it means to actually take care of someone. Ruth Hahn is planting tomatoes again. Lily is trying to help and pulling up things that aren't weeds. I am sitting on the back porch watching them and not taking a single minute of it for granted. That's all I have left to say.